My son announced it right after grace while I was still holding my fork. The turkey was steaming, the gravy boat warm against my palm, the Christmas lights blinking softly behind him like a bad joke. I had hosted Christmas in this house for over 30 years. After my husband died, it became my anchor, my proof that I was still standing. I was 59 years old, tired in the bones, but proud of the life I had built room by room. Daniel cleared his throat and stood up. "I just want to say something quickly," he said, smiling in that careful way that always meant he had rehearsed. "Before dessert." My daughter Emily stiffened beside him. She didn't look at me. That was the first warning. I felt it then. That familiar tightening in my chest mothers get when something is about to go wrong. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Daniel lifted his glass. We finalized the sale. The word didn't land right away. "I'm sorry," I said. "The sale of what?" "The house," he said. "This house." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard him. I waited for the laugh, the clarification, the correction. None came. "You sold your house?" I asked. He shook his head gently like I was confused. "No, Mom, we sold yours." Emily finally looked up then. Her eyes slid away from mine almost immediately. The room didn't go quiet. Christmas music still played, the lights still blinked, but something inside me cracked sharp and sudden. "You can't sell my house," I said. "You don't own it." Daniel set his glass down slow and deliberate. "We do now, legally." That word hit harder than anything else he could have said. I pushed my chair back. "Explain now." "You signed the paperwork last spring," he said, "after you were in the hospital. Remember, you wanted us to help manage things." I remembered the hospital, the sterile smell, the doctor telling me the tumor was benign. I remembered Daniel sitting by my bed telling me not to worry about bills or documents, telling me he'd handle it. I did not remember agreeing to lose my home. "You said it was for emergencies," I said, "in case something happened to me." "And it still is," Emily cut in. "You'll be taken care of." Taken care of? Like a dependent. Like someone who no longer mattered. "When do I have to leave?" I asked. Daniel hesitated just long enough. 30 days. The air left my lungs. "You planned this," I said. "We did what made sense," he replied. "The market is incredible." "For you," I said. Emily stood abruptly. "Please don't do this right now." "In my own house," I said quietly, "on Christmas." They left early, carrying leftovers in containers I had bought. I watched their car disappear down the street I had memorized for decades. Later that night alone, I found the closing statement under a stack of mail. My name wasn't listed as owner. I was listed as beneficiary. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house settle, every creak sounding like a countdown. At dawn, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table staring at the paperwork spread before me. I read it slowly this time, carefully. They had created a trust. Daniel was trustee. Emily was co-trustee. I was someone to be provided for, not consulted, not respected. By mid-morning, I had called the bank, the county clerk, and finally a lawyer whose name I got from a woman at church. Her voice was calm, steady, unflinching. "Did you understand what you were signing?" she asked. "No," I said, "and I was medicated." There was a pause. "That matters." Hope crept in quietly. Daniel showed up that afternoon without calling. He used his key like he still owned the place. "We need to focus on next steps," he said. "I already am," I replied. "I hired a lawyer." His jaw tightened. "That's unnecessary." "Not to me." Emily arrived minutes later, arms crossed, already defensive. "You're blowing this up," she said. "You sold my house," I replied. "That's not small." Daniel's voice hardened. "You weren't capable of handling things anymore." That one hurt the most. "I raised you," I said. "I worked 2 jobs after your father died, and you decided I was disposable." Silence fell. They left angry, convinced I would back down. They didn't understand something. I wasn't fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. And I had just begun. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish and old paper, the kind of place that made you sit up straighter without being asked. I folded my coat on my lap and listened as she spoke, her pen tapping lightly against a yellow legal pad. "Your children assumed you wouldn't challenge this," she said. "That's common in family cases like these." "I'm not common," I replied. She nodded once, like she'd already reached that conclusion. We went through the timeline slowly. The hospital stay, the medication, the signatures. Each detail mattered. Each one felt like reopening a wound, but I stayed with it. I owed myself that. She slid a document across the desk. "This is the trust agreement. Do you recognize it?" I stared at my signature. It looked like mine, but weaker, slanted, rushed. I remember Daniel standing over my bed telling me where to sign, saying the words were standard, saying we could go over it later. "There was no later," I said. "That also matters," she replied. By the time I left her office, my hands were steady. Not because I felt safe, but because I felt informed. Knowledge does that. It gives you something solid to stand on when everything else feels like it's shifting. On the drive home, memories kept surfacing. Daniel asking for help with his first mortgage, Emily borrowing money for grad school, me saying yes every time without contracts, without conditions. Because that's what mothers do. Or at least that's what I thought. That evening, Daniel called. "You're really going through with this?" he asked. "I already am," I said. "This is going to get ugly," he warned. "It already did," I replied. "You just didn't expect to be uncomfortable." He lowered his voice. "People will talk." "They already are," I said. He hung up without another word. Over the next week, pieces began to fall into place. The lawyer requested records, bank statements, emails, communications with the realtor. Each request tightened the circle around what they had done. Emily stopped responding entirely. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I missed her approval, but because it confirmed something I hadn't wanted to admit. She had chosen a side long before Christmas dinner. On Sunday, I went to church and sat in my usual pew. Women I had known for years squeezed my hand without asking questions. That quiet understanding held me together more than any speech could have. That night, alone in the living room, I noticed a small crack in the wall near the window. I remembered when it happened. A winter storm years ago. My husband had patched it himself, promising he'd repaint in the spring. He never got the chance. I touched the wall gently and whispered, "I've got this." For the first time since Christmas, I believed it. I found the letter by accident. I was cleaning the hall closet looking for an old scarf when a small box slid out from the top shelf and hit the floor. The lid popped open. Inside were documents I hadn't seen in years. Deeds, insurance policies, and an envelope with my husband's handwriting on it, my name written carefully. I sat down on the floor and opened it. The letter wasn't long. It didn't need to be. He had always been economical with words, trusting me to read between the lines. He wrote about planning, about loving your children without surrendering your future, about how easily trust can be mistaken for entitlement. He told me he had arranged a contingency, something quiet and legal, meant to protect me if decisions were ever made without my full understanding. My hands trembled as I read the final line. "If this letter ever matters, it means you're stronger than you think." I took the envelope to my lawyer the next morning. She read it slowly, then leaned back in her chair. "This changes the landscape," she said. "How much?" I asked. "Enough that they should be very concerned." Daniel asked to meet that afternoon. I agreed, but not at the house. We met at a cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. Neutral ground, public. He arrived early, suit-pressed phone face down on the table. "You're enjoying this," he said. "I'm enduring it," I replied. "There's a difference." He leaned forward. "You could stop all of this." "I could have stopped it if you had told me the truth," I said. His jaw tightened. "You would have said no." "Yes," I replied, "and that should have mattered." Emily arrived late, eyes darting around the cafe. She sat without greeting me. "We can fix this," she said. "We can increase what you get." "I don't want an allowance," I said calmly. "I want accountability." Daniel's face changed then. Fear flickered across it, brief but unmistakable. "You don't understand what you're risking," he said. "I understand exactly what I risked when I trusted you," I replied. They left without finishing their drinks. I stayed sipping my coffee, slowly feeling something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The first official response from Daniel's attorney arrived on a Tuesday morning, folded neatly inside an envelope that looked more expensive than it needed to be. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the wood, and read every word carefully. The letter was polite, clinical. It framed the situation as a misunderstanding, a loving family trying to help an aging parent manage her affairs. It suggested mediation. It suggested compromise. It did not suggest accountability. I handed the letter to my lawyer that afternoon. She skimmed it once, then smiled faintly. "They're nervous," she said. That word warmed me more than it should have. The requests for information continued. The realtor's emails showed careful coordination. The bank statements showed transfers made just days before the sale closed. Not illegal on their own, suspicious in context. "What were they moving?" I asked. "Control," my lawyer replied. Emily sent a message for the first time in weeks. It was short, defensive. "This is getting blown out of proportion." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Then I deleted the draft and said nothing at all. Silence became my shield. At church that Sunday, someone mentioned Daniel's name in a whisper. I pretended not to hear it. Reputations unravel quietly before they collapse publicly. The mediation was scheduled for early spring, a neutral office, a neutral mediator, neutral words meant to soften hard truths. Daniel arrived confident. Emily sat rigid, her foot tapping beneath the table. The mediator spoke about family bonds, about intentions, about how money complicates love. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly. "You didn't misunderstand me," I said. "You excluded me." The room shifted. "I was not confused," I continued. "I was misled. And when I objected, I was dismissed." Daniel interrupted. "We were trying to help." "You were trying to control," I said. Emily's voice cracked. "So what do you want from us?" The question was meant to corner me, to force a number. "I want my authority restored," I said, "and I want the trust dissolved." The mediator cleared her throat. "That may not be realistic." "It is," my lawyer said calmly, "and we're prepared to pursue it." The session ended without resolution. That was fine. I wasn't there to reconcile. I was there to be heard. That evening, I cooked dinner for one. I ate slowly without the familiar ache of trying to please someone else. I slept better than I had in months. The evaluation was scheduled in late spring, a formal assessment of my mental capacity at the time I signed the documents. Daniel's attorney insisted it was standard procedure. I knew it was their last defense. The evaluator was professional, kind, and precise. She asked about dates, medications, finances, events. She asked me to recount the hospital stay in detail. I remembered everything. Not perfectly, but clearly. When it was over, she smiled gently. "You're very aware," she said. "More than most people your age." I thanked her and left my hands steady on the steering wheel. Weeks passed. The waiting was harder than the meetings. I kept busy. I gardened. I organized old photos. I went through closets I had ignored for years. One afternoon, Daniel showed up unannounced again. He stood on the porch, shoulders slumped, no longer confident. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. "I did," I replied, "because I know what you did." He swallowed. "We thought you'd forgive us." "I forgive mistakes," I said, "not schemes." Emily stayed away. She sent another letter instead. It was long, justifying, careful not to apologize. That told me everything. The evaluation report arrived in early summer. My lawyer called me as soon as she read it. "It's clear," she said. "Undue influence, limited capacity due to medication, lack of disclosure." My chest loosened for the first time in months. The court date was set. Daniel's calls became more frequent. His tone shifted from frustration to desperation. "This is destroying us," he said. "No," I replied, "this is revealing you." The night before the hearing, I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the familiar shapes of furniture emerge in the dark. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never hand my life over to someone else again. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, low ceilings, no grandeur, no drama built into the space itself. I realized, standing there with my coat folded over my arm, that justice rarely announces itself with spectacle. It arrives quietly, if it arrives at all. Daniel sat 2 rows ahead of me, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. Emily sat beside him, eyes fixed straight ahead. They did not turn around. I was grateful for that. I didn't need to see their faces to know what they were feeling. I had lived with their moods my entire life. The judge listened patiently. My lawyer spoke first, laying out the facts with steady precision. Dates, documents, medical records, the timeline of my hospitalization, the absence of disclosure, the sudden creation of the trust. Then Daniel's attorney spoke. He used words like concern, assistance, and tension. He painted a picture of children overwhelmed by responsibility, trying to protect their mother from herself. I felt a flicker of anger rise in my chest, but it didn't control me. I had moved past reacting. When the judge asked me to speak, I stood slowly. My knees didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. "I was not confused," I said. "I was recovering, and I trusted my children." I described the hospital room, the medication, Daniel standing at my bedside pointing to where I should sign. I described the trust I had placed in him, not because he earned it in that moment, but because I had earned it over a lifetime of motherhood. "I did not agree to give up my home," I said. "I agreed to accept help if I ever needed it." The judge nodded slightly. That small gesture meant more to me than any promise. The ruling did not come all at once. Some decisions were reserved, others were immediate. The sale was suspended. The trust was placed under court review. Daniel and Emily were temporarily removed from any authority over my assets. Daniel's face drained of color. Emily finally looked at me then. Her expression wasn't anger, it was disbelief. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered. I walked past them without a word. I had not come here to perform my pain. The weeks that followed were heavy but different. Banks froze accounts. The buyer withdrew. The deal collapsed quietly the way it had been assembled. Daniel called repeatedly. I did not answer. Emily sent a text. This didn't have to happen. I stared at it for a long time. It already had. By late summer, the house felt like mine again. Not because the threat was gone entirely, but because I had reclaimed my authority within it. I rearranged furniture, gave away things I no longer needed, painted the guest room a soft, forgiving blue. Every small choice reminded me that autonomy is built through action, not declarations. The final hearing was scheduled for August. By then, the narrative had shifted. What began as children helping their mother had become a clear case of manipulation. Friends who once defended Daniel grew quiet. Emily stopped attending church altogether. Isolation is often the real consequence of exposure. The judge's final ruling came on a Thursday afternoon. The trust was invalidated. The sale was voided. All transferred funds were ordered returned. Daniel and Emily were permanently barred from managing my affairs. There was no applause, no gasps, just the scratch of a pen and the closing of a file. I walked out of the courthouse alone, feeling lighter than I had in years. Daniel tried to stop me in the hallway. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. I looked at him then, really looked. "You meant to benefit," I replied. "And you didn't care what it cost me." Emily stood behind him silent. She did not meet my eyes. That evening, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. The same porch where I had once waited for my children to come home late. Where I had worried. Where I had given endlessly. I felt no urge to call them. Instead, I called my lawyer and scheduled an appointment to update my will. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I redirected assets to causes that mattered to me. Education, housing, legal aid for older women who had been dismissed the way I was nearly dismissed. I kept the house. But more importantly, I kept my self-respect. Betrayal had stripped away illusions I didn't realize I was still carrying. Justice had given me something quieter and more enduring. Peace. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept without fear of waking up erased. Autumn arrived gently, almost apologetically, as if the world itself understood I had endured enough upheaval for 1 year. The maples along my street turned shades of copper and red. Leaves collected in the corners of the yard, the way memories collect, when life finally slows down. I raked them myself, not because I had to, but because I could. Each pull of the rake across the grass felt like proof of something simple and powerful. I was still here. Daniel did not call anymore. His silence was different now, not strategic, defeated. Emily sent a card for my birthday in October. No message inside. Just her name written carefully like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I placed it in a drawer and closed it without ceremony. People began asking questions I hadn't prepared answers for. Neighbors, women from church, even distant relatives who suddenly remembered my phone number. "How are things with the kids?" they asked, their voices careful. "I'm well," I replied. That was the truth that mattered. One afternoon, my lawyer invited me to her office again. Not for bad news, for closure. "All filings are complete," she said. "Nothing further is pending." I nodded, absorbing the finality of it. For months, my life had been measured in documents, deadlines, hearings. Now there was only forward. "You handled this with remarkable composure," she added. I smiled faintly. I didn't feel composed. "That's not what strength feels like," she said. "Strength feels like deciding anyway." On the drive home, I passed the elementary school where Daniel and Emily had once waited for me after class. I remembered rushing from work, praying I wouldn't be late, apologizing even when I wasn't. I wondered when motherhood had quietly turned into obligation in their minds. That evening, I cooked a proper meal. Not a quick one. Not something designed to please someone else. I set the table with real plates, lit a candle, ate slowly. Later, I sat with an old photo album. There were pictures of us smiling, of holidays, of birthdays, of moments that had been real even if they no longer told the whole story. I allowed myself to grieve then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. Grief doesn't mean regret. It means acknowledgement. I closed the album and whispered a quiet goodbye to the version of my life that believed love was always reciprocal. Thanksgiving came faster than I expected. For the first time in decades, I did not host. I did not cook for a table full of expectations. Instead, I accepted an invitation from a friend whose husband had died years earlier. We were a small group, 5 women, all over 50, all with stories we didn't share until the wine was poured and the plates were cleared. There was laughter, real laughter, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you afterward. No one mentioned Daniel or Emily. I appreciated that more than sympathy. Driving home that night, I realized something quietly profound. My life was no longer centered around who might leave me. It was centered around who stayed. In December, I received a letter from Daniel. Not an email, not a text, a letter. The paper was thick, the handwriting careful. He wrote about stress, about pressure, about making choices he thought were responsible. He said he was sorry for how things had unfolded. He did not say he was sorry for what he had done. I folded the letter and placed it beside Emily's birthday card in the drawer. Some things don't need replies to be complete. Christmas approached again, the anniversary of betrayal. I considered leaving town. I even looked at brochures. In the end, I stayed. I decorated the house differently this year. Simpler, fewer ornaments, fewer memories tugging at me from every corner. I cooked for myself. I played music I liked. I slept in. On Christmas morning, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee and watched the snow fall softly onto the street. The same house, a different woman inside it. I felt no anger, only resolve. Whatever my children chose to believe about me now was no longer my burden to carry. I had chosen myself, and that choice, I was learning, was the most powerful inheritance of all. By the time spring returned, I understood something I had never been taught as a woman or as a mother. Peace is not passive. It is built deliberately through boundaries that feel uncomfortable at first, and then slowly become sacred. I spent March sorting through decades of accumulated life. Closets, drawers, boxes I had packed and repacked every time I thought I might move someday. Each item asked a quiet question. Do you still need me? Do I still belong? Some things I kept. My husband's watch. Old letters from friends who were gone now. A chipped mug Daniel had made in kindergarten. I kept it not because it hurt, but because it no longer did. Other things went into donation boxes. Furniture chosen to impress. Clothes bought for occasions that never came. I felt lighter with every trip to the curb. One afternoon, my lawyer called to confirm the final paperwork had been recorded. No reversals, no loopholes, no appeals left. It's finished, she said. After I hung up, I stood in the living room and let the words settle. Finished. For so long, my life had revolved around endurance, enduring grief, enduring responsibility, enduring disappointment disguised as duty. I had mistaken survival for virtue. Now I was learning something else. Choice. I chose to repaint the front door a deep, confident blue. I chose to replace the dining table where Christmas had shattered me with a smaller one that fit my life now. I chose to say no when people assumed my time was available simply because I was retired and alone. Some were surprised, a few were offended. I was unmoved. In April, Emily called for the first time since the ruling. Her voice was tentative, almost formal. I heard you repainted, she said. I did, I replied. There was a pause. It's nice. Thank you. She waited. I did not fill the silence. I just wanted to check in, she said finally. I'm well, I replied. Another pause, longer this time. I know things went wrong. Yes, I said. She did not push. That was new. Progress, perhaps, or simply caution. After we hung up, I felt no rush of hope or dread, only neutrality. That told me everything about how far I had come. Daniel did not call. Instead, I heard about him through others. Career troubles, a move to a smaller place, whispers that followed him now the way certainty once had. I did not celebrate his discomfort. I acknowledged it. Actions ripple outward. Eventually they return. One evening, sitting on the porch as dusk softened the edges of the world, I realized I was no longer waiting for apologies. I was no longer waiting for recognition. I had recognized myself, that more than any ruling or document was the true turning point. On my 60th birthday, I woke early without an alarm. The house was quiet sunlight just beginning to spill across the floorboards. I made coffee and carried it outside, sitting on the porch wrapped in a light sweater. The air was cool, clean, honest. I thought about the woman I had been at 50, at 55, how much of herself she had given away in the name of keeping peace, how often she had swallowed discomfort to avoid conflict. I wished I could reach back and tell her something simple. You are allowed to take up space. The phone rang mid-morning. A few friends, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Emily sent a text, just 2 words, "Happy birthday." I replied with a single thank you. In the afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where my husband was buried. I brought fresh flowers and sat beside his stone longer than usual. I told him everything, about the house, about the court, about the betrayal, and the clarity that followed. I'm okay, I said aloud, better than okay. The wind moved gently through the trees. I felt no sadness in that moment, only connection. That evening I hosted dinner. Not a big one. 4 women, all over 50. All with stories that had been dismissed at some point as exaggeration or bitterness. We ate, we talked, we told the truth. At one point, one of them asked quietly, "Do you ever regret fighting your own children?" I set my glass down and considered the question carefully. "I didn't fight my children," I said. "I fought erasure." The table went quiet. Heads nodded. After they left, I washed the dishes, slowly savoring the ordinary rhythm of it. The house felt warm, alive, mine. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote something I wished someone had told me years ago. Love does not require self-betrayal. Family does not excuse injustice. Age does not cancel authority. I closed the book and turned off the light. If you're listening to this story and something in it feels uncomfortably familiar, let me say this clearly. It is not too late, not to speak, not to protect yourself, not to redraw the lines someone crossed without permission. Revenge does not always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like survival with your dignity intact. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts. Your experiences matter more than you think. And if you want to hear more stories about truth, justice, and the quiet power of reclaiming your life, stay here with me.